Then Elliot set the envelope down on the table in front of everyone and smiled. Not a smile that meant warmth, the kind that meant he had already decided how the evening would end. Fiona Carver-Holt, 37-year-old wife of Elliot Carver, stood at the far end of the dining room in her in-laws' house in Oakville, Ontario, holding a glass of sparkling water she hadn't touched in 20 minutes. The table was set for 14. Elliot's mother had ordered the good china, the kind she only brought out when she wanted to impress someone or remind someone of their place. It was supposed to be an anniversary dinner. Elliot had told her to dress nicely. She had. A navy-wrap dress, low heels, her dark hair pinned up the way he always said he liked it. She'd driven 40 minutes from their home in Burlington to be here by 6:30. She'd brought flowers for his mother. She'd said all the right things to his father before dinner. And now Elliot was smiling at her from across the table like he was about to deliver a punchline. "Go ahead," he said to the room, not to her. "Tell her what you found." His brother Darnell, 41, leaned back in his chair. Darnell had the kind of confidence that came from never having been wrong in front of an audience, mostly because he chose his audiences carefully. He worked in commercial real estate in Mississauga. He spoke at every family dinner as though the table were a boardroom and he had already won. "We did some digging," Darnell said, "on Carver Medical Supply, the company that's been undercutting our bid on the Trillium contract for the last 8 months. Fiona took a slow breath. "And," said Elliot's father, Hugh, 68, retired, who had spent the better part of the last 3 years complaining about Carver Medical Supply at every family gathering. A competitor, he'd always said. Aggressive pricing, impossible to outbid, no idea who was behind it. "Turns out," Darnell said, "nobody knows who owns it. It's registered through a numbered company in Ontario, parent holding through a trust in British Columbia, layers on layers." He paused for effect. "Professional job. Someone who didn't want to be found." Hugh shook his head slowly, the kind of theatrical disappointment he had perfected over 6 decades. "Whoever it is," Elliot said, still looking at Fiona, "they've cost us close to $4 million in contracts over the last 2 years. $4 million. Do you understand what that means for a family business?" Fiona understood exactly what it meant. She had known since the moment Darnell started talking where this was going and where it was not going. She had known for longer than that, actually. She had known since August, when she'd sat in a boardroom on King Street West with her legal team and her CFO and made the decision to pursue the Trillium contract because the numbers were right and the timing was right. And she had spent 12 years building Carver Medical Supply into something that could compete at that level. She had not known, in August, that the other bidder would be Elliot's family company. By the time she found out, she had already won. She had thought about telling him. She had sat with that decision for 6 weeks, alone, turning it over the way you turn over something sharp. She had tried to imagine the conversation. How it would start, how it would end, whether he would understand. She already knew the answer to that last part. She had known for longer than she wanted to admit, so she said nothing, and she sat at this table now in her in-laws' good china dining room and listened to her husband describe the company she had built. The company she had started in a 400-square-foot office in Hamilton, with 1 part-time employee, and a line of credit she'd mortgaged her condo to secure, as though it were some faceless corporate villain responsible for all of his family's misfortune. "Whoever it is doesn't play fair," Hugh said. "That's the thing. A company like that, hiding behind numbered corporations, no face, no accountability. That's not how honest business is done." Fiona looked at her glass of sparkling water. "I agree," she said. Elliot's mother, Beverly, 65, who had not looked at Fiona directly since she arrived, refilled her own wine glass. "Hugh's been trying to get someone to look into it properly," Beverly said. "A lawyer, someone who can pierce the corporate veil, as they say." "It's not that simple," Fiona said, and immediately regretted speaking, because now everyone was looking at her. "You know something about corporate law," Darnell said. "Not hostile. Curious. The way a cat is curious about something smaller than itself." "A little," she said. She had a law degree from Osgood. She had never told Elliot's family that. She had never told them much of anything, actually. Elliot had always managed what they knew about her. When they were first together, she'd assumed that was normal. Every couple navigated the in-law dynamic differently. Later, she understood it differently. He had told them she worked in logistics, which was technically not untrue. She ran a company. Logistics was part of it. She had never corrected the impression. Looking back, she wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe because correcting it would have required a longer conversation. Maybe because by the time she understood who Elliot really was, she had already started to understand that some information was better held quietly. The way you hold a card you're not sure you'll need until you do. She had spent 7 years building Carver Medical Supply. She had spent the last 4 married to Elliot. She had spent the last 2 of those 4 years deciding what to do about it. The dinner moved on. Hugh told a story about a client in Etobicoke. Darnell's wife, Patrice, talked about their older son's hockey schedule. Beverly asked Elliot when they were going to do something about the house, meaning Fiona's house. The one she'd bought before they married, the one Elliot had moved into and never stopped treating as temporary. Fiona ate her lamb and said the appropriate things at the appropriate moments, and watched the evening the way she'd learned to watch things she couldn't control, from a slight distance, with patience. After dinner, when the plates had been cleared and Beverly had brought out the butter tarts she'd made from scratch, Elliot's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it. His expression shifted, something quick and practiced, the shift of someone recalibrating in public, and then he said he needed to take it outside. He was gone for 11 minutes, Fiona counted. When he came back in, he was looser. That particular looseness that she'd catalogued over 4 years. The dropped shoulders, the easier smile, the way he reached past her for his wine without making eye contact. She had hired someone, 8 months ago. A professional. The kind of person who was very good at finding out things that other people preferred to keep quiet. She had not hired him because she suspected. She had hired him because she had stopped believing that suspicion was the wrong word. The report had come in 6 weeks later, and it had been thorough. The woman's name was Jocelyn. She worked in marketing. She lived in a condo in Liberty Village. She and Elliot had been seeing each other for at least 19 months, possibly longer. There were receipts from the Broadview Hotel from a restaurant in Leslieville that Fiona and Elliot had gone to together twice, from a weekend in Collingwood in February that Elliot had told Fiona was a work retreat. Fiona had read the report in her car in the parking garage under her office building. She'd sat there for 35 minutes, then she'd gone upstairs and chaired a budget review meeting. She hadn't cried about it. That surprised her at first, but she'd understood, eventually. She hadn't cried because some part of her had already done that work before the report confirmed anything. You do not grieve a thing at the moment it is proven. You grieve it at the moment you first allow yourself to know. She had known for a long time. Back at the table, Darnell was talking about the Trillium contract again. There was a meeting next week, he said. They had a lawyer looking at avenues for challenging the award. The numbered company structure was suspicious, he said. There might be grounds. Fiona set down her fork. The contract was publicly tendered, she said. Darnell looked at her. I know that the selection process followed all provincial guidelines. The winning bid was evaluated on price, delivery capacity, and compliance history. If the challenge is on process, you'd need to demonstrate a specific procedural breach. The table had gone a little quiet. That's very specific, Darnell said. I told you, Elliot said, not quite joking. She knows a little about logistics. Who did you say you worked for? Hugh said. And there it was, the question she had fielded 14 times over 4 years, redirected or softened or simply absorbed, handed back without an answer that required a follow-up. The question she had always treated like something she could fold up small and put away. She didn't fold it up this time. I don't work for anyone, Fiona said. I own a company. Silence is not actually silent at a dinner table. There is always the creak of a chair, the small sound of someone setting down a glass. Beverly's spoon against the edge of her butter tart plate. What company? Hugh said. She looked at Elliot. Elliot's face had done something she had never seen it do before. It had gone entirely still. Not the calculated stillness of someone choosing a reaction. The involuntary stillness of someone who has just understood something they cannot ununderstand. Carver Medical Supply, Fiona said. Nobody spoke for a long moment. That's Darnell started. My maiden name, she said. Carver. I started the company before I married Elliot. I kept it registered separately. That was always my intention. Hugh set both hands flat on the table. A gesture she'd seen him make before, always when something had happened that he felt entitled to be angry about. You're telling me, Hugh said slowly, the way people speak slowly when they need the words to hold the weight they're placing on them, that you are the person who has been taking contracts away from this family for 2 years. I've been competing for contracts, Fiona said. Legally. In a public tendering process. You sat at this table. I sat at this table many times, she said. And I heard a lot about what a frustrating competitor Carver Medical Supply was. I can imagine that's an uncomfortable thing to hear now. Elliot made a sound that wasn't a word. Did you know? Darnell said to Elliot. His voice had gone flat, the boardroom voice stripped of performance. No, Elliot said. That at least was true. Fiona had made sure of it. Not because she'd planned this moment. She hadn't, not exactly. But because she had learned, somewhere in the last 2 years, that there is a difference between secrecy and privacy. She had been private. She had not been deceptive in the way that Elliot had been deceptive. She had simply been a person who owned something valuable, and did not announce it in rooms, where the announcement would be used against her. "I'd like to understand," Beverly said, in the careful voice of a woman who is very angry and has decided to perform reasonableness, "why you would hide something like this." "I didn't hide it," Fiona said. "Elliot knew what I did when we met. He described it to your family however he chose to describe it. I corrected the impression many times. You may not have been listening. That landed where it was supposed to land." "You corrected it," Beverly said. "I said I ran a company. I said I worked in medical supply. I said I had a background in law. These are all things I said in this room at this table more than once. I can't be responsible for what was heard." Elliot pushed his chair back. "Can we?" He looked at Fiona. "Can we talk about this at home?" "We can talk about it here," she said. "Or we can talk about it with our respective lawyers, which is probably what's going to happen either way." "I'll leave that to you." The word lawyers did what words like that always do in a room full of people who have been pretending the situation is something other than what it is. It clarified the situation. "Respective lawyers," Elliot said. "Yes, Fiona, I've spoken to mine already," she said. "I've been speaking to mine for a while." The drive back to Burlington was 40 minutes. Fiona made it in 38. She didn't turn on the radio. She drove in the particular quiet of someone who has just done something they have been preparing to do for a long time and who is not yet sure if the relief they feel is appropriate. It was March. The highway was dry, but the ditches still held grey snow from February, and the sky above the 403 was the deep blue-black of a night that had decided it was done with winter but hadn't committed to anything warmer yet. She thought about the drive she'd made in the opposite direction 4 years ago, when Elliot had brought her to Oakville to meet his family for the first time. She'd been 33. She had been, she remembered, genuinely hopeful. The kind of hopeful that is not naive but is still open, that has seen enough to know what can go wrong and chooses to believe this particular thing might not. She hadn't been wrong about everything. She'd been wrong about the right things, which is different. The house was hers. That was the one thing she'd been entirely clear about. From the very beginning, the house was hers, purchased before the marriage, registered in her name, protected. Elliot had lived there for 4 years and never paid the mortgage, which had bothered her less than it perhaps should have, mostly because she understood why. If he paid the mortgage, he'd feel entitled to the house. She'd rather he feel like a guest. She parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a while. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Elliot and 1 from a number she didn't recognize. Darnell, probably, working out whether there was anything to sue her for. There wasn't. She'd had 3 different lawyers look at the structure of Carver Medical Supply over the years, precisely because she'd anticipated that someone, at some point, might look for a reason. She went inside. She made tea. She stood at the kitchen counter in the way that you stand after a thing is over. Not exactly tired, not exactly relieved, just quiet in a way that feels unfamiliar, because you have been tense for so long that the absence of tension feels strange. Her phone buzzed. A text from her friend Rosario, who knew most of it. She typed back, it went, which was enough. Elliot came home at 11:45. She heard his key in the lock, heard him set his shoes on the mat. He always did that, which was one of the small things that had taken her a long time to stop finding charming, and then heard him stop in the hallway. She was sitting in the living room with the lights on and her tea mostly drunk. He stood in the doorway and looked at her. "I didn't know," he said, "about the company. I want you to know I genuinely didn't know." "I know you didn't," she said. "That doesn't." He stopped. Started again. "My family is going to want to challenge the contract. They won't succeed, Fiona Elliott." She set her mug down on the coffee table.
"I know about Jocelyn."
The name took the air out of the room in the way that only a specific name can. Not a category, not an accusation, but a name, which is something far more concrete and far harder to navigate around. He sat down in the armchair across from her. Not the armchair he usually sat in, the other one. "How long?" he said. "I've known for 8 months. I had someone verify it before that." He put his face in his hands. "I'm sorry." She watched him. "I was confused," he said into his palms. "I don't know. Things got complicated." She had wondered how he would explain it. She had prepared herself for most of the versions. Confused was a version she'd expected. "You cheat on someone," she said, "and when they find out, you say you were stressed and confused. I want you to think about how that sounds." He looked up. "I built a company," she said, "by myself, without anyone's help and without anyone's money, including yours. I kept it separate from our marriage not because I was hiding it from you, but because it was mine, and I have always known that it needed to remain mine. I think, on some level, I knew why. Even before August, even before I hired someone to confirm what I already understood. You hired someone, yes, that's..." He stopped himself. "What were you going to say?" He shook his head. She stood up. "The house is mine," she said. "You know that. The company is mine." My lawyers have been drawing up the separation agreement for the last 6 weeks. It's ready when you are. 6 weeks, he said. I wasn't going to do it at Christmas. I wasn't going to do it at your mother's birthday. I waited until there was a right time, and tonight was a right time. She picked up her mug and went to the kitchen. She heard him sit there in silence for a long moment. She heard the sound of someone realizing that the architecture of the situation they thought they understood has been quietly rebuilt around them, and that they are the last person in the room to notice. She rinsed her mug and put it in the drying rack. In the morning, she had a call with her CO at 7:30. The Trillium contract had a second phase opening in June, and she intended to bid on it. Her team was good. Her numbers were right. She had built something that could compete at any level she chose to bring it to, and she had done that alone, carefully, without announcing herself in rooms that were not ready to receive the announcement. She turned off the kitchen light. Outside, the March night was very still. Somewhere on the highway, she could hear the long, quiet sound of a transport truck running west. The grey snow in the ditch at the end of the driveway had begun very slightly to melt. She had been patient for a long time. She was done being patient now.